The other day, I was watching this lecture, or rather, I was listening to a podcast that was from a recorded lecture from a psychologist. And the psychologist was saying that every expression humans can come up with is an ego expression. Not only is every expression that humans can come up with is an ego expression, but it's a projection of ourselves out onto the world. An ego-based projection of ourselves out onto the world. And whenever two people have a discussion, when one person is talking to another person, and there's a bunch of ideas in my head that I would like to get into your head, because I think my ideas are fantastic. I think my ideas are helpful. I think my ideas are beneficial. The only way my ideas can get into your head is if you already have some kind of ideas in your head that are similarly structured to the ideas in my head. Which means, according to the psychologist, the only type of human communication that makes sense is when there's an automatic or a pre-existing overlapping resonance between ideas. Meaning, if I have an idea in my head and I think this is a wonderful idea, but it doesn't sound familiar to any of the ideas in your head, and I tell you my brilliant sounding idea, or what I think is a brilliant sounding idea, it's not going to make any sense to you whatsoever unless you already have a set of pre-existing ideas inside your head that kind of already match with the structure of this idea. Furthermore, every idea that I have is an ego projection onto the world. I see the world and I want to project my ego onto the world in a way that validates my ego, that validates my belief in my hierarchical superiority. And she was saying that every expression of the ego is an expression of hierarchical superiority, or an attempt to assert hierarchical superiority, which begs the question. And clearly you've already thought about this, and clearly you've probably come up with the same conclusion yourself. But the question that this begs is, if I have an idea, and my idea is based on an ego projection, which is an attempt to assert my hierarchical superiority, and if you have an idea that resonates with my idea, this idea coming from your head is also an attempt at hierarchical superiority. That means two of us are trying to battle over to see who has the highest hierarchy, which suggests that every conversation we have, every expression we share with other people, every idea we have in our brain that we try to get into the brain of somebody else is an attempt to establish or demonstrate hierarchical domination. And she was saying at its core, this is the driving force, the ancient, instinctive, pre-proto-human driving force of all human communication between humans in a hierarchical structure. To assert hierarchical dominance, that every expression of conversation, every expression of an idea is an attempt to assert hierarchical dominance. I was listening to this economist speak, and he was saying kind of the same thing, that if you look back through history, you'll find a lot of examples of two cultures coming into contact and them trading with each other. And this seems to be the best state of human existence, of mutual exchange, voluntary exchange. In fact, many economists will say this is the backbone of a modern economy, of ancient economy, of future economies. But this guy was saying that this is really a temporary equilibrium, a best temporary state. It's not the ideal state. Whenever two people come in contact with one another, the ancient instinct is to exploit each other. This person wants to exploit this person. This person wants to exploit this person. That is the ideal. The ideal human expression is of an exploitative nature. But because they're of relatively equal strength, they can't exploit one another, so they do the next best thing, which is to create voluntary trade. Under this model, voluntary trade is really just a temporary step of what each think is the ultimate goal, which is to exploit the other person, which is why all societies collapse. All societies start out with economies that are based on mutual trade, but they all tend towards exploitation. Because when you start out with mutual trade, one group is going to trade with another group, but both groups have the same idea in the back of their head. We don't want to trade with this person. We just want to take all of their stuff with as little effort as possible. And that's what this group thinks too. This group thinks, I don't want to trade with this group. I just want to take all their stuff with as little effort as possible. And so they start off by trading, but eventually one gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon they extract all the wealth from this other group. And that's what happens in societies. That's what happens in economies. That's what happens in civilizations. That's what happens in conversations. So every time you have a conversation with someone, at its deep level, all conversations are instinctively driven to be as exploitative as possible. But because we're relatively equal strength, because we have relatively equal status, we pretend that these conversations are based on mutual trade. We pretend that I have something for you and you have something for me. But deep in our ancient instincts is this secret dream to exploit the crap out of each other. And this is how all communication is based in the long term. Now, whether or not this makes sense to you, I don't know. But clearly, when you think about this, you might begin to look back over your past experiences and see how this tends to be the rule rather than the exception when you have conversations with people, when you have relationships, and see how these relationships evolve over time. Now, this is a very dismal view of human nature. But then again, economics is called the dismal science because it forces us to understand the truth about human nature. And if you look back through history, you'll see that most relationships between diverse groups is one of very, very exploitative nature. And another example of the ego that she was talking about, another aspect of the ego, this is not necessarily an aspect of the ego itself, it's more of a kind of a sidestepping part of the ego, and that is that we continuously reframe things. The part of our ego that maintains our sense of ability to potentially exploit the person we're talking to is our ego is constantly reframing things in real time, so we believe we're just about to get one over on the person we're talking to, or something bad happens and we reframe the event to think, oh, I wanted that to happen. And so there's always these dynamics going on. Underneath every human communication is this deep subconscious desire to exploit the person we're talking to. And every time we express ourselves, we have this reframed conscious belief that this is for mutual benefit, but in reality, we want to exploit the other person, and we're continuously reframing things in real time, so we believe we're doing something for mutual benefit, which means that the entire unfolding of reality is a hallucination. The entire unfolding reality, our memories of reality, our anticipations of the future, depending on how well we can remember the future, are all reframed hallucinations to make us feel like we're just about to exploit somebody. Now, I don't know if this makes sense to you. I don't know if you can remember this in your past communications. I don't know if you want to learn how to leverage this in your communications so you can better exploit people in the future, or if you want to continue to reframe things, is up to you. But clearly, somebody like you who has a history of understanding things like this, clearly somebody like you who can understand this better than others might have a way to benefit from this. And if you're interested, you can check out the link below to learn more. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.